going to just switch devices here momentarily. And it's the bracket.
While you're doing that, let me just mention, we will have time afterwards for question and answers. But if you could please write them down and pass them. I'll tell you what we're going to pass them. But write down your questions, we will have time for question and answers.
Okay. I probably will wander a lot, so that way, if I'm in your way, just wait a few seconds, I will be out of the way. So, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate following Dr. Carroll. I admire his work and the research he's done. So, this is a phrase that I think is very profound. Fathers, be good to your daughters. This is my third time speaking on this at the United Nations. And as Lynn Walsh has said, it doesn't get enough attention. Sometimes men are talked about as the enemy at the Commission on the Status of Women. So I realize that I may have a target on my back. But let me elucidate that a bit more. Okay, so you may ask yourself, why should I care about the father-daughter relationship at a Commission on the Status of Women? And shouldn't we be talking about the mother-daughter relationship? Well, we could talk about that. That would take up more time than you probably have, and you don't want to hear me go on for that long. But for today, I'm going to focus on father-daughters because there's a lot of important research that most people don't know about. So, Katy Perry, who is a pop icon in the United States, and I'm not endorsing her because I'm not a big fan of her music, but she is very popular in the United States. This is something she said in Rolling Stone magazine. She says, I don't need a dude to have children. It's 2014. Of course, that was 2 years ago. Then she goes on to say, we are living in the future. I'm not anti-men. I love men, but there's an option if someone doesn't present himself. So I'm going to see if I can spend the next little while answering this question and saying, well, you know what, Katie, if you have a daughter, she will need a man as a father figure, and let me give you the research why that is. So I'm going to try to make the case to show why maybe she's a little misguided when she says something like that. So as Dr. Carroll has elucidated and broke down the data quite well, the family, I believe, is the cause and the solution to almost all social, political, and economic issues that we're facing. Now, it's not something that's going to fix everything. Clearly, we have to help sustain families who are headed by single parents, whether it's single dad, single mom, or another difficult circumstances. But I have found often in the work that I do in promoting the families, the fundamental unit of society, too often we treat these solutions as a Band-Aid or a cough medicine. So let me tell you what I mean. My son is 12 years old, and recently he started getting a lot of sneezing and coughing and sniffles, and it wasn't going away. So of course we would give him some cough medicine, sometimes NyQuil, to help alleviate the symptoms. But we noticed that it kept persisting, and we had to keep giving him cough medicine. And after a while, we decided to take him to a doctor. Thankfully, we have that option. Took him to a doctor and find out that he has a bacterial infection. So we could keep giving him cough medicine, but the problem will persist. The symptoms, we could mask the symptoms only temporarily until we have to keep giving it more. And too often, in the policy world, whether it's at the international level or the local level, we come up with cough medicines as solutions and not antibiotics. And I believe the family is one of the antibiotics to solve a lot of these bacterial infections, if that makes sense. Again, it's not a fix-all, but that is the cause and the solution. And let me give you an example of that. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, who was a prominent psychologist who passed away several years ago, he summarized his data with this statement. The family is the most powerful, the most humane, and by far the most economical system known for building competence and character. When I teach this to my students, I ask them, what are some entities or organizations that you might put in place in the family that too many people are trying to replace? Well, sometimes we think the government is the best place to build, is the best entity to build competence and character. Maybe it's the educational system or something else. But I think Dr. Carroll made it pretty clear, and if we had more time, we would keep making the mounting evidence clear, that the family is the most powerful, humane, and economical system known for building competence and character. Well, I'm going to, speaking of he for she, I'm going to let Hermione Granger, known as Emma Watson, say a little bit about that.
Today, we are launching a campaign called He for She. I am reaching out to you because we need your help. We want to end gender inequality. And to do this, we need everyone involved. This is the first campaign of its kind at the UN. We want to try and galvanize as many men and boys as possible to be advocates for change. And we don't just want to talk about it. We want to try and make sure that it's tangible. I was appointed as Goodwill Ambassador for UN Women 6 months ago. And the more I've spoken about feminism, the more I have realized that fighting for women's rights has too often become synonymous with man-hating. If there is one thing I know for certain, it is that this has to stop.
I will echo that. I am also a he for she. I have 4 sisters, 3 daughters, a mother, a wife, and 90% of my students are female. And so, in fact, I introduced my wife to many what people would call girly shows, such as Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, because I love those. I am a he for she and for gender equality. But let's promote it the right way. I like the paradoxical approach Dr. Carroll talked about. Too oftentimes we shoot ourselves in the foot by pushing away the very things that can help us and say we need to get rid of that. Maybe one of them is fathers. In fact, I'm going to make that case more here right now. So David Popenoe out of Rutgers University has said, it's very easy for a man to father a child. To father a child, unlike to mother a child, typically refers to a biological act. And men today do not seem to have much of a problem in that regard. But it is difficult for a man to be a father. To be a father rather than merely to father means to give a child guidance, instruction, encouragement, care, and love. Fatherhood, the state of being a father, is declining to a remarkable degree because so many fathers no longer live with their biological children. Okay? So, I want to show maybe the ripple effect of absentee dads that, you know, if you throw a rock into a pond, any of these places, you notice that the ripple is in its greatest magnitude at the point of entry where the rock went in, or whatever had been thrown in. But the ripples extend over a very long ways. If you ever sit there and watch it, I don't know if you've been as bored as I have, but I've watched the ripples go for quite a long ways. And they will extend, and the research has bared that out, that this fatherlessness trend that's not only in the United States but around the world is having impact through societies, through countries, through cultures, and through generations. I appreciate the countries that are, I've spoken with many delegations in South America and in Africa and other places in the world where the grandparents and the parents and the children are all connected. There's a lot of research supporting the intergenerational connectedness of families. So daughters knowing about their mothers, their grandmothers, their fathers, their grandfathers, and their ancestors before and the difficulties they went through and then how they overcame them. It empowers children quite a bit to know about those things. Okay, so I'll talk about this ripple effect. We know that dads are supremely confident the moment their kids are born. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. When my first child was born, my son is the oldest, I remember I was there in the room, and I was white as a ghost because I just witnessed the childbirth. The doctor says, "Would you like to cut the umbilical cord?" And I said, "No." I was a little woozy. And he says, "Too bad." And he gave me this numbers, and I cut it. And then everybody started cheering. And I go, "This woman just had a baby, my wife, and you're cheering for me for cutting." That's a little backwards. And I've gained more confidence, but let's talk more about death. This is my family 3 years ago. My beautiful wife, the queen of our home, right here. This is my son, who's 12, Carter, and this is Molly, who is 9. In fact, I'm going to give you a more update version. This is just before I left. This which was about a week ago. So Molly is 9, Naomi is 7, and Eleanor is, well, she'll be 5 in a couple weeks. They truly are. I'm an academic. I'm not supposed to have tears and emotions. Here's the data. They really are the light and love of my life. Okay, that's enough. All right. In the United States, 24 million of children, at least according to the census data, are growing up in a biological father-absent home. And if you look at the trend from 19, and by the way, if you want any resources or references, I have them all. I decided to put them on, most of them on the slide. 1960, 9 in 10 children reside with 2 married parents. So you can see that trend, and especially the out-of-wedlock childbirth, that the great crossover that Dr. Carroll referred to. So here's just a summary of some of the data of fatherlessness. So children who are growing up in a household where the fathers are not present, they're at 4 times greater risk of poverty. They're more likely to have behavioral problems in school, and at home and other places. 2 times greater risk of infant mortality. Interesting, that when the father isn't present, that the infant is at much greater risk. More likely to go to prison, more likely to commit crime, and this is especially heavier on the sons and the daughters, but this is true as well for girls. 7 times more likely to become pregnant as a teen, perpetuating and especially if that teenage mother has a daughter, that daughter is at greater risk to becoming a teen mother herself, perpetuating the cycle. More likely to face abuse and neglect. If we're talking about violence to women, it's important to also note that sons raised in father-absent households are more likely to treat girls and women with disrespect because they learned how to treat them from their mothers, but also from their fathers. They're more likely to be aggressive. Women, and I'll talk about this more, women who grow up without a father are trying to fill the void of that male relationship through having a lot of unhealthy sex, sexual exploitation, and putting themselves maybe as being in the porn industry, being strippers, or being in prostitutes, which sets them up for more possible violence, which I'll make that connection a little bit more later. More likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, 2 times more likely to suffer obesity, 2 times more likely to drop out of high school. So, that's just the summary. I'm going to break some of these down in more detail here. One study of over 2,000 families found that children born to fatherless homes show higher levels of aggressive behavior, experiencing significantly more caretaker changes than children born to married mothers. So, okay, well, I'll just move forward from there. So, what is unique, though, about the father-daughter relationship? Because I've talked mostly generally about the father impact on sons and daughters, or children in general. Well, this is me with my 3 daughters again. So again, this is why I am he for she all the way. I mean, I'm all in, okay? But I want to be he for she in a healthy way, and I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot, or shoot my daughters in the foot, metaphorically speaking, okay? There is more at stake. This is from Dr. Leonard Sachs. He summarizes quite a bit of research on gender. He says there is more at stake for the old question of nature versus nurture. The failure to recognize and respect sex differences in child development has done substantial harm over the past 30 years. I'll just maybe a couple studies that I can rattle off. One of the studies he cites is newborn babies in a crib. When there's a mobile that moves, that's over the baby, and a nurse standing nearby, the vast majority of the female babies are looking at the nurse. The vast majority of the male babies are looking at the moving parts. So from the very beginning, without any socialization, their brains are wired different, and they have different strengths. We shouldn't try to pit the genders against each other, but how can we complement and enhance each other? Just like, sorry for the bad sports analogy, but you have a center on a basketball team, typically the tallest player, and a point guard, typically the shortest. They have different skill sets, but they both work together for the cause of the team. And they both need each other. So it is with the gender of men and women need to work together for the betterment of society and especially their children. Another thing, Professor Linda Nielsen, she's really, I think, the United States leading researcher on the father-daughter relationships, has fantastic books on it. One of them is called Between Fathers and Daughters, which I highly recommend because it helps daughters heal their relationships with their fathers and vice versa. She's a professor of women's studies at Wake Forest. Here's what she has to say. True, most fathers and mothers relate differently to their kids, but why would we want them to be identical? That's one of the benefits of being raised by a mom and a dad. They don't always do things the same way. But this doesn't mean that one parent is inferior to the other. We're not doing father-daughter relationships any good if we're being sexist when we assume that dad's way of parenting are inferior to mom's because he's a man. Okay, so they interact differently, but they're both important. So, just another summary on the father-daughter relationship. Fathers who have a loving, respectful, communicative, involved, active relationship with their father, while they are growing up, often have an advantage over other daughters in areas such as not being overly dependent on men, not abusing drugs or alcohol, not being in prison, which are some of the ones I mentioned before, not being raped or sexually abused, not developing an eating disorder, and not being afraid. Apparently I'm afraid of imprisonment because I put that on there twice, but without even knowing it. So, let me give you a little bit more on that. Without an involved father present, girls are more likely to start puberty earlier. So menarche happens earlier, which we also know there's a correlation between that and the earlier a girl is more likely to have sex, or she's more likely to have earlier sex. Unhealthy and numerous relationships with men, which I'll break down more in a moment, because I think to me that's one of the most important factors that we've got to consider. More likely to be a teen mom, more likely to exploit herself in a variety of ways. Well, I'll give you a story on that in just a minute. And then she seeks to fill the void left by father by seeking attention and affection from men. Because the research has found over and over again that the foundational relationship for male relationships for girls is found in the father-daughter relationship. Now that doesn't mean that other men can't come into the life and be a father figure. We certainly need that when there is fatherlessness. But certainly the ideal, which I think policy and law should try to hold up the ideal and not just the exception, because then we undermine the rule when we only focus on the exception. The ideal is that father-daughter strengthening. So, I mentioned that already and skipped that. Okay, another summary of the research. Girls whose fathers are present and involved, and those are critical. It's not enough to just be in the room and be looking at your phone. Daddy, look at the picture I drew. Oh, that's great. So present emotionally, present psychologically, present physically, and involved in their lives are less likely to become sexually exploited at a young age or at all, more likely to forge healthy relationships with men, more likely to develop a healthier view of intimacy and sexuality. I was speaking with a couple of women who had been in the porn industry as actresses in the porn industry and as strippers. They call themselves overcomers or survivors. They've gotten out of it, they've seen the light, and one of them told me through tears that when she danced for men, she was really dancing for them because she wanted to dance for her father when she was a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old. It never happened. He ignored her, he was cold, he was calculating, he was work focused. And she was trying to, she didn't realize that until she was older, but she was trying to get that attention. And she's since been able to heal from that situation. But too many girls are struggling with that. Now that doesn't mean they're all going to go into the porn industry. But if we had time, I could unpack the porn industry and the research that shows that when men are addicted to that, they're more likely to treat their spouses or their wives and their daughters as objects. They ignore them, they become even more cold, but that's another discussion for another day. So, let me show you an example of an involved father.
Oh, those boys are much too much. Those boys are much too much. We got the spirit, we're hot, we can't be stopped. We got the spirit, we're hot, we can't be stopped. We're gonna beat them and bust them.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
All those boys are much too much. Those boys.
Now does it take sacrifice on the man's part? Yes. Does it take education? For all we know, this man could be a divorced father. But the research shows that even when the father is educated about the importance of his father-daughter relationship, He's more likely to be involved in her life, more likely to maybe heal the relationship with his ex-wife, even though they may not get remarried. And a lot of the problems that come with fatherlessness are minimized to a certain extent. I don't think they can be eradicated, but they're minimized by that father when he's educated, and I'll give you some research of how we can educate them. When he's educated on that importance, and it strikes him here, in the head and in the heart, he starts to be more involved and active and helps his daughter in many ways. So again, from Linda Nielsen, the father has greater impact on the daughter's ability to trust, enjoy, and relate to males in her life. Here are a couple quotes from young college-age students from some other data, some studies that Dr. Nielsen, that I just referenced. She interviewed dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of young women. So let me give you a quote from one of them. She said, "My dad has always been distant and my mom is clinically depressed. So I prefer random one-night stands with no attachment involved. I pick guys I feel superior to and can control. I don't trust people, especially men. I close up emotionally and never want to depend on men for anything." Another girl said, "My dad never compliments me about how I look. I wish he would. Especially during times when I have no boyfriend. Even at my school dance when I was dressed up like a bride, he never once told me I looked pretty." My 7-year-old Naomi, for some reason, she wants to be told she's pretty all the time. So she will say, "Do I look pretty in this? Do I look pretty?" And so I try to tell her this way and that. You could be wearing your pajamas and you are beautiful to me. You don't need to be dressed up like that. But yes, that's a pretty dress. So that is something that the girls need to hear quite a bit. John Mayer, who is a popular musician in the United States, he actually summarized the research really well, even though I don't think he has any idea about what the research shows. And I'll let him sing it.
Fathers, be good to your daughters. Daughters will love like you do. Girls become lovers who turn into mothers. So mothers, be good to your daughters too.
So again, if you think about the data on the cycle of teen mothers, and more likely to have a child out of wedlock or as a teenager. You think about the data on the foundational relationship with males. I think he summarized it quite well. Okay, so here's one way fathers can be involved, whether they are divorced or not. And I believe it wholeheartedly. We won't watch the whole clip, but men can take a lesson in any country, regardless of their resources, to do something like this with their daughters.
Brother? Yeah, man. Dude, it's a big night.
Pretty nervous?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm actually pretty nervous. It's been a while, for sure.
Yeah, so where are you going?
I'm gonna have the next week set up dinner on the back porch.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she won't expect it at all.
You found my eyes, stole my heart, and yours. You're my princess, so everlasting, and yours. When the world is down, I hold on to the world, and I'm yours.
Hi, Dad. When'd you get so cute? Look, this one.
Love you.
Are you ready to take that for the date?
I am ready for the date.
Okay.
Little light, be able to see right through. I just need to hear from you. The sound of your breathing. Little hands, be able to hold my heart.
Yeah, for the second time, I'm sorry to cut it off. That was the most heartwarming thing. But again, this illustrates that fathers can set the foundation It doesn't mean if you're a female and you grew up without your father, you're doomed for life. But clearly, the father can tell them, remind them of how pretty they are. And remind them of what true beauty is. And it is not the stuff you see in the media, not the stuff you see on billboards, and not the stuff you see at Victoria's Secret. What true beauty is, that's from within and from without. And the father can really emphasize that. The research is very clear on this. He can also help her understand how a man should treat her. And if he's not treating you like this, he's not worth your time. And then, so anyhow, I do daddy-daughter dates with my daughters. I haven't seen them in a week and a half, so I'm very weepy. I'm sorry. I do it with them about once a month or every other month. And then with my son, I try to help him understand how he should be treating girls and his sisters. And sometimes I get overprotective. So if my son is bullying one of his little sisters, as typical older brothers do, I sometimes have a short fuse because maybe I'm a little too overbearing on the he for she's sake. But anyhow, that's what fathers can, one example of what fathers can do. So John Gottman from University of Washington, he's written several books on marriage, on emotional coaching or emotional intelligence, and he says research in child development tells us girls are losing far more than an assistant mom. Fathers typically relate to children differently than mothers, which means their involvement leads to the development of different competencies, particularly in the area of social relationships. Mounting evidence now suggests that involved fathers, especially those who are emotionally available for their girls, make a unique contribution to their daughter's well-being. So, here's how, I'll just summarize some more of the research on the father-daughter relationships. Fathers have found to have a greater impact than mothers in the following areas. They're more likely to challenge the kids intellectually. They're more likely to discourage kids from whining and feeling sorry for themselves, which obviously there's a give and take. Sometimes people need to be listened to and empathized with and understood and validated. I think that needs to happen more often than not. And sometimes a proper solution needs to be suggested. I think the combination of the two is a really good combo. They're more likely to focus on how to solve problems instead of complaining, encourage independence and self-reliance, teach children to take responsibility for the mistakes. They're more likely to get the kids to try new and difficult things, encourage to try again after failing, motivate kids to reach their full potential. You think about empowering women. This is very empowering. Yes, mothers can do that, and mothers do a phenomenal job doing it, and I don't think I'll ever be, I think, as good as a parent as my wife is. But again, she is different than I am, and I shouldn't try to compare myself because we have different competencies. In summary, fathers have been found to have greater impact on mothers in education, in their daughter's education, their daughter's profession, athletics, in male relationships, in confidence, in self-esteem, mental health. They have a greater impact on the likelihood of anxiety and depression, and on body image. So, now let's move forward here. Here's another example of an involved father. He's coming home from work.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a parent.
When I come home from work, for some reason my daughters have this weird thing. I'm always wearing a tie at work, and so if I'm wearing a purple tie, they'll say, "Oh, it's the grape juice tie." So they'll come up and drink out of the tie. It's just this weird tradition. If I'm wearing a brown tie, oh, it's the root beer tie. They'll come up and drink out of the tie. And some days I'm like, all right, I have a drink. But it's a cute tradition that I have when I get home from work. Here's something, a father of two daughters, President Obama himself.
He may be the most powerful man in the world, but Barack Obama wants us to remember he is also a dad. So on Sunday, he gave a speech about it.
This Sunday's Father's Day, and so I wanted to take a moment to talk about the most important job many of us will ever have, and that's being a dad.
But then he took a moment to open his heart about the father he never had.
I never really knew my own father. I was raised by a single mom and two wonderful grandparents who made incredible sacrifices for me. And there are single parents like my mom all across the country who do a heroic job raising terrific kids. But I still wish I had a dad who was not only around, but involved. Another role model to teach me what my mom did her best to instill. That's why I try every day to be for Michelle and my girls what my father was not for my mother and me.
He made the candid remarks during a weekly address to the nation in a bid to inspire men across the country to be the man his father never was.
If there's one thing I've learned along the way, it's that all our personal successes shine a little less brightly if we fail at family. That's what matters most. When I look back on my life, I won't be thinking about any particular legislation I passed or policy I promoted. I'll be thinking about Michelle and the journey we've been on together. I'll be thinking about Sasha's dance recitals and Malia's tennis matches, about the conversations we've had and the quiet moments we've shared. I'll be thinking about whether I did right by them and whether they knew every day just how much they were loved.
Well, given that that was broadcast to 300 million Americans.
So happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, and have a great weekend.
So whether or not you're a fan of President Obama, whether or not you agree with his policies, and he has summarized quite well, all of our personal successes shine a little less brightly if we fail at family, and that's what matters most. Again, the research, especially coming out of the University of California and can't remember the other school right now, it's slipping my mind. They've done this supporting father involvement initiative. They've worked with low-income families, children of divorce, to try to help men understand this statement here, really. Trying to strengthen relationships. And it has worked. I'll show you more research on that in just a moment. Let me sum up or wrap up here. Okay, so what does society get from involved fathers? Well, less dependency on government programs, because now the fundamental unit of society is doing a lot of the teaching. A lot of the stuff that Dr. Carroll talked about, less poverty and crime, improved economy, less teen mothers, better maternal child health, more educated, skilled, and emotionally healthy women. So here's that supporting father involvement. So this is using a couples group intervention approach to enhance. So they, what they did is they created a 16-week course, and they asked for participants to come in from all different types of backgrounds. They had Mexican Americans and African American families, Caucasian, all different ethnicities, backgrounds. Most of them are on the lower end of the socioeconomic status. Okay? And based on a family systems approach, they decided, because the family is a system, they all interact. They're like cogs in a clock. So they assessed, before the program, they said, okay, we want to assess each parent's well-being and their mental health. We want to assess the 3-generational patterns of adaptation. So this goes back to the intergenerational connectedness. How do the different generations adapt to difficulty? And so they assess that in advance. They also assess the couple relationship quality, whether or not they were married. Some of them were divorced. Like I said, they assessed that. They assessed the father-child relationship quality, and then they also assessed the life stress and social support outside of the family. At the end of the 16 weeks, they have found a significant increase in father involvement, in family strengthening, and it doesn't mean everybody was remarried that was divorced, but the dads became more involved simply with a program that was delivered effectively through education. And do you think of the ripple effect that has for good when we can educate? Rather than just trying to throw cough medicine, they're trying to throw something now, antibiotics, to solve the problem, okay? There's many more other programs out there that are like this, internationally. I think we need to promote them. We need to promote in the media fatherhood not being a bunch of dunces or idiots that don't know what they're doing. Too often in TV shows, on Netflix, and in commercials, men are looked at as buffoons, and we need to try to change that dialogue as well. So we need to educate dads in these programs how a culture of respect and love in the home, respecting the importance of the body, helping their daughters understand strength and confidence in the way they dress and their attitude and their behavior, optimal health rather than optimal size. Hopefully that rings true. I'm trying so much for my wife to understand that optimal health, optimal size, and she's getting it, I think. But there's so many messages to the contrary, and I don't want my daughters to have that as well. Appropriate intimacy in all areas, not just sexual. There's not just sexual intimacy. We have emotional intimacy. We have psychological intimacy. We have spiritual intimacy. All these things create the great whole that should be intimacy. And that's proper health. That's proper education, rather than just saying, you know, have sex all you want as long as you're safe. Healthy sexuality and how to understand sexual feelings, and they can also help men need to understand. If I had more time to talk about the RAM model, which is the relationship attachment model from Dr. John Van Eck. And it's just really helps you understand the pattern that first I get to know someone, and then I trust them, and then I rely on them, and then I commit to them, and then the sexual touch comes in that pattern, rather than the reverse order. And that's how, over and over again, in his therapy practices and in his research, he has found that to be a healthy pattern for relationship development. And on daddy-daughter dates and discussions, when dad has with his daughter, he can help her understand those things. But first we have to educate them. This is a father's attempt to try to steer away boyfriends, and it doesn't work too well.
I, McKenna.
I,
McKenna.
McKenna.
Promise. Daddy.
That
I will not
I will not.
have any boyfriends.
That I will not.
Have any boyfriends. Say it. Any boyfriends?
I just want to look at them though.
So maybe not the healthiest way, Dad. Dad's trying. He can use a little education on how to promote healthy relationships, and it's not to avoid boyfriend. Okay, that's enough. Okay. Now, one way to help promote fatherhood. This goes back to Dr. Carroll's presentation. Professor Robert George out of, let me see if I can get out of your way here, I'll just wander up this way. Out of Princeton, he has said, when a baby is born, there is always a mother nearby. That is a fact of reproductive biology. The question of whether a father will be involved in the life of that child, and if so, for how long. Marriage increases the odds that a man will be committed to both the children that he helps create and to the woman whom he does so. And just on a personal note, this is my daughter Naomi, when she was born. And it is a video, so I'm going to skip ahead. Okay, another note on marriage. Back to Dr. Kopenow out of Rutgers. He has said that to reestablish marriage will help with fatherhood. And he says employers and social workers, marriage counselors, teachers and principals can all have a way of helping to promote this in their dialogue. And again, you don't tell people and I like the first order of marriage and second order of marriage that Dr. Carroll talked about. We're not saying just get married that will solve all your problems, but again, healthy relationship development, education, and get married to the right person at the right time. And don't purposely delay it because it'll get in the way of our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And don't marry when you're 16, okay? This is a video from Dove trying to promote fatherhood. I know you're going to be really upset that I just changed it. I know, I'm sorry, but you can go watch it. It's on YouTube. So Dove is trying to change the narrative on fathers, and they've put out videos such as that. John Gottman again. Too many men have been absent from their families for too long, leaking soaring rates of divorce and out of wedlock births to rise the tide of youth violence and other social problems. Government officials and religious leaders and social activists of all persuasions are calling on men to take more responsibility for raising their children. They are saying it's time for dads to come home. And this is a picture that my daughter drew of me and her dancing. And apparently I hiked my pants up a lot higher than I thought. But one of the things in the research about, I'm just going to go back to pornography as I wrap up. It teaches the false messages about love, intimacy, relationship, and happiness. This relationship, the father-daughter, establishes the truth about each of those. So, when dads did not have a great relationship with their fathers, find freedom from pain and resulting issues of the past, the next generation, our children, are strengthened. We give them a gift that will produce the kind of legacy we all wish for every child. This is what halts and even reverses the staggering statistics of father absence. This is the path to healing the next generation in our society. As fathers, we must heal our own wounded hearts to fully enjoy and raise our children well. That is the founder of the Great Dads Project here, Keith Zefren. Now, what does a daddy get from his girl? Well, there's a lot of there's a lot of research on that as well, but let's just say it will teach him what it means to be a real man, and it will change his life forever. Thank you.